Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to Friday. I'm sure if you are experiencing things that I'm feeling, it's been a probably long week for all of us, but we are so grateful that you're taking your time out to be here with us today. I am seeing some familiar faces, some new faces, many of which are familiar to me in general, but also new here. So thank you for being here on this Friday with Suman and I. We have our guest, Russ Terry, here with us today. And so we're super excited to chat with Russ today and get to hear a little bit about him and what is going on. So I will kick it off. Just before I intro and do his bio, I wanted to share with you the, kind of some of our rules or guidelines that we like to talk about. So we do record these. If you prefer not to be on camera, please feel free to turn your camera off. If you want to have some conversation afterwards, we try to typically stay somewhere, depending on the conversation, between 5 to 15 minutes and just have a little further conversation with our guest speakers. That's unrecorded. So we'll turn the camera off. You're welcome to stay if you're able. And then just as a reminder, this month's a little bit different with the holiday, but typically the last Friday of every month we have as an unrecorded session. That session this month is November 20th due to the Thanksgiving holiday. And then December 25th, we won't have a session because of that. Without further ado, as now I wanted to just share that with you, I want to introduce you to Russ, who is a great friend. I call him the king of gratitude. So Russ is a coach, a motivational speaker, and diversity consultant who has coached over 400 people from companies like Microsoft, Google, JP Morgan, and PwC. And he has spoken at countless organizations, which includes the FBI, FedEx, United Airlines, NASA, and L'Oreal. He's also the author of a fantastic book series on gratitude and founder and CEO of Life Coach Radio Networks, a podcast that's a platform for 135 coaches from around the world that he's hosted shows on. Russ and I met actually at one of his trainings down in Nashville, Tennessee, when I was sent there when I worked at FedEx Ground. And so he and I met. He sat down at my table and said, "Is anyone sitting here?" And I was like, "You are now." And we had the best, amazing life and work conversation. He later coached me as well. So I just cannot say enough great things about him. I've been through a similar training like this talk with him. So you are in for a treat today, and I will stop blabbering and introduce you further to let Russ talk about anything he'd like to add to that. Russ, do you want to just start out maybe by telling us why you were excited to be here with us today?
Yeah, I think the issues that we're going to talk about, diversity, anti-racism, are things that are so important to our society now more than ever, and important to me personally. I have a multicultural family, if you will. My niece and nephew are Asian. My stepmother and her entire family are Latino. I'm gay. So, we check a lot of the boxes, if you will. And obviously, 2020 has been the most challenging year that any of us has had to deal with. But that doesn't mean that things happening this year are new. They've been happening for a very long time. But now, because of smartphones, we're seeing evidence of it. So it's a really challenging time for the Black community in particular. And obviously, I'm not Black, but I feel like Black Lives Matter, hence the shirt, and my mission. And I'm grateful to both of you for having me here today.
Thanks so much for being here. So Russ, because I know you personally, and you know that I just have the utmost respect for you and just your positivity, maybe, if you can share with us, because I know that you are so into gratitude and I know that you're an ally. Can you share with us like how maybe like you're staying positive and what kind of keeps you fueled as you work through your allyship?
Yeah, and it is challenging staying positive. Being an ally, I have experienced roadblocks which have been hurtful and frustrating. So I can't even begin to empathize what it's like for a person of color like you, Tiffany, or you, Suman, or anybody who's listening to this. So I can't empathize fully, but I can sympathize. And the one thing I am very grateful for, I mean, I'm grateful for a lot, but one thing in particular is that I'm grateful that there is a lot of momentum around this topic now. And just looking at the faces who are in our audience today, we have a diverse group of people tuning in. And I really can start to feel the culture shifting toward a society that is specifically anti-racist. And I have a book here. If you haven't done so already, go out and buy How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. We can't just say that we're not racist. We have to actually consciously say that we are anti-racist. So there's a difference between not being racist and being consciously anti-racist. And people, this one roadblock that I ran into, this awful, terrible woman, older white woman who's the head of HR at a hospital where my mom was. And it's in a primarily white area. They have about 1,000 employees, and I experienced a micro inequity, microaggression, if you will, while my mom was a patient there between two employees. And I, sent the company an email right then and there, and she called me back the next morning. I was still in the hospital with my mom, so I couldn't speak to her then. So number one, it took about 5 phone calls to finally get to speak to her. She was quite unresponsive. Number two, when I finally did speak to her, she was spouting that all lives matter BS, and I'll try not to curse on here because this is a family show. And it was literally like, I'll show you the brick wall in my home. It was like I was talking to this brick wall over here. And, the all lives matter is basically saying that, well, I have some racist tendencies. And, the fact that this is the head HR professional of a 1,000-person organization, a hospital no less, was really upsetting and disturbing. So we still have a lot of work to do, and I'm grateful for all the people that are in. And I assure you, I am not stopping until this issue is solved.
Wow. Wow. I'm just still even trying to process through that. I hear this a lot in terms of all lives matter, or somebody said to me the other day, and it was a very good friend, sweet woman. I adore her, think the world of her, but she's like, well, I don't see you as Black. I don't see color. And I was like, I love you, but I got to stop you there. And I have been vulnerable on our own series here to say, I used to be a person who said that, because what the intent usually is, oh, I didn't, I don't look at you or judge you or treat you differently because of your color, but you do see my color. We see each other as hopefully our full selves. But for you, Russ, what do you think is the barrier for people when they say that? Do you think that it's because they're so afraid that they're going to be labeled a racist? Or do you think it's lack of education on what that means? Or I'd love to hear your perspectives on what you think people mean, or how we can get around this all lives matter movement.
Yeah, I think part of it is a lack of knowledge. Part of it is these are really difficult conversations to have. So in that scenario, you have to muster up the strength and energy to have a difficult conversation with her, to tell her that that's offensive. And it's like, not only are you launching your business and being a great wife and exercising self-care, but now you have this part-time / full-time job of educating all the white people about what they're saying that's offensive. And it's exhausting. And I'm grateful to have many people of color as some of my closest friends in the world. And, I posted something on Facebook the week of the George Floyd murder, and I specifically used that word murder because it was. And she sent me a private Facebook message about the way that I worded something and how that could be seen as offensive. So I'm grateful to her and you and all people of color who are, in addition to everything they have going on in this terrible, crazy year, carving out the time to help educate those of us who are white, who even somebody like me that does this for a living, are saying things that either are offensive or are somewhat offensive, etc.
I think that's a great point, Russ, is that we are continuously educating ourselves. And even within a group of people, I can't speak for every Indian that's out there, right? And I'm sure, Tiffany, you'll agree, you can't speak for every African-American person that's out there. So how we view certain things and what we might, something that might take us a little bit aback, it doesn't mean that that's the one and only way. And I say that because I want people to still feel comfortable by asking curious questions, right? Don't sit and I encourage people not to just sit there and wonder and walk away with a certain thought without asking, only because they're afraid of what the response might be.
Yes, I agree with that 100%. We need to have these difficult conversations so that we can all learn and grow. And I would bet money that all of us have room for improvement in terms of our cultural competence and how we can be more culturally inclusive and understanding. And I am constantly trying to improve myself, reading articles. I have a Word document that I keep all of the articles in so I can go back to. I email them to myself because there's a lot to learn. Cultural competence isn't something that's taught in school, but it should be.
Mm-hmm. So you do a lot of this DEI work, and I'm curious then, because a lot of the conversations Tiffany and I have had in our series and the work that you do, I'm sure you're finding, is that at the end of the day, you have to decide to do the work, right? The onus is on the individual to step into their discomfort, to do some of that self-reflection. So any thoughts, tips, or experiences that you've had where you've moved someone from that space where they believe they are fine just the way they are into getting them to move into a space of saying, I need to work on myself. I need to continuously do this work around DEI and cultural sensitivity?
That's
And
a
it's a
great
loaded
question.
question.
Yeah. I would love to say that I've been able to move the needle in my family, but I haven't yet, which is a little upsetting, as you can imagine. I am hopeful / optimistic, though, that in the speaking gigs that I've had these last 3 months, and I just had my first diversity speaking engagement in early August, and I've continued to now have them every 2 to 3 weeks or so since then. I'm hopeful / optimistic that there have been people in the audience who have been inspired to take action. Tiffany, you and others commented on the comments that I shared from the last one last week on LinkedIn. I think I gave it a couple of weeks ago. So the cool part about that, it's the Institute of Internal Auditors. So these are people from all different companies. And one of the, quote, visionary ideas that we talked about was actually making diversity and anti-racism part of an internal audit of a company. It's something that is currently not part of an internal audit of a company. So I think that's one visionary idea. There also have been some other visionary ideas. In that webinar, one of the participants actually told me about his company. It's called Hack.Diversity. Hack.Diversity. It's a Boston-based company that helps Black and Latinx students pursue careers in tech. As you all probably know, tech has terrible diversity. It's mostly male and pale, as I like to say, mostly white men. And it helps students get internships with fast-growing companies. And if you go to hackdiversity.com, specifically the About section, the sponsors at these companies are 90% white, which is really great to see. That's what we need to happen. We need all of the white people, which is still the majority and still the majority in the positions of power, to say, you know what? I am committed to carving out opportunities for Black and Latino individuals because those are typically the most underrepresented groups. And we can't just shrug our shoulders and say, well, there aren't enough candidates. What this Hack Diversity is doing is saying, yes, we know there aren't enough candidates. That's why we're going into the high schools and helping Black and Latino high schoolers know that this is a great career for them and give them scholarship opportunities to great schools that we hire people from, so that we're building the pipeline at an early age. And it's not a snap your fingers solution where, we have a solution to all of this next week or next month or maybe even next year, but it starts the process of improving diversity in America.
So true. So true. So I know that for you, so kind of sticking with the theme of internal audit and kind of making sure that we check our own biases and stuff at the door, can you give us maybe some examples of things you've either seen or maybe experienced yourself in the workplace, or even through your coaching, some of the things that, I know we've had our own conversations, but some of the things that you've seen in the workplace or that show up as those micro inequities or micro aggressions, just for people who may not understand the terminology or who may not know what that looks like or what the significance of that is.
Yeah, so a micro inequity are those things that may seem immaterial on the surface, but often they happen multiple times and in multiple ways, and they are quite material. So, and it isn't necessarily reserved to just race-related micro inequities or microaggressions. It can be male, female, gender-based, etc. So things like, well, I meant it as a compliment, or what country did you move here from, or you're so exotic, or when are you going to have a baby, or buying a male colleague a new laptop, but not buying the female colleague a new laptop. So again, may appear immaterial on the surface, but really the impact of them is quite material. And then, was that a two-part question?
No, I think it was a little loaded. I'll be fair. There is a question in the chat, however, Danielle, I didn't forget about you. What are some of the examples of racist behaviors and discrimination that you have encountered within the businesses that you've coached?
Yeah, so
people too, I guess.
Yeah, Danielle, great question. I'm actually going to share a couple of examples. So these are from a friend of mine that I worked at PwC with, awesome Black guy, married, father of two, went to St. John's University here in New York. So the first example he shared was, we were leaving PwC, maybe 9 p.m. On a weeknight. He was in his suit. Gets the train, from Grand Central across the street from our office. And as you do sometimes on the train in New York City, you go between cars because you have to catch your connection really quick. And especially when you live out in the burbs, you don't want to miss like the 9:11 because the next one's at like 10:15. So he was walking between the cars, again, as we do as New Yorkers, and a police officer stopped him and asked to see his ID. And I'm pausing for effect there. No one has ever stopped me and asked to see my ID in a public place. So as if he, wasn't supposed to be there. And I think the police officer spewed some BS like, oh, well, you match the description of somebody that we're looking for, which is a common terrible phrase that bad police officers say. So that was one incident. And then another incident just happened during the lockdown. He lives in Westchester now and works for a US government agency. and was headed out to grab lunch for himself and to bring lunch to his daughter at daycare. So he was in his St. John's hoodie, sweatpants, broad daylight, lunchtime, walking like diagonally across a parking lot. And a police officer stopped him again and asked to see his ID. Could you imagine walking through life having to show your ID when you haven't even done anything wrong? You're just going to drop lunch off at your daughter's school in the middle of your workday at your hardworking CPA job, trying to make money for your family of four. So, these are just a couple examples just from one person. So you can imagine if I surveyed all the Black men I know, how many examples I would have. We'd be here till Monday morning. So, the things that Black individuals have to go through here in the US are terrible.
Yeah, it's, and I think, one of the other things that I found that people, kind of, there's a lot of assumptions that go into things, right? Sometimes that's because people are uneducated. Sometimes it's because of how they've been educated growing up, or they make assumptions like people, you mentioned the one about kids, and people have said to me like they almost like they're seem surprised that I don't have children, or they've asked me like, why don't you have kids? Why don't you want kids? And I'm like, okay,
so
like
terrible.
what is that, a stereotype? Like what do you mean? Like, first of all, that's none of your business, and we just met. And even if I've known you and we've established a relationship, if we have a relationship, you probably know why. There is no rhyme or reason. Like, it's not that I don't like children, but these are some of the things that people ask and they say, and that you have to constantly deal with. And to your point, if you're a person of color, there's enough things going on in life and in 2020 for all of us as it is. But then you have these other things that you feel like you have to overcome, and the weight is so heavy. So I'm grateful for everyone here listening who is wanting to learn, educate, who's an ally. But sometimes it is very, very difficult to be in this seat.
And I apologize on behalf of the people who've said that to you, Tiffany. It's totally understandable that would be upsetting. And, not only do you have to carry the weight of being a Black woman in America, but now you have to carry the added burden of not having kids, which is totally your prerogative. Good for you. You have more time for self-care without kids weighing you down. No offense to those who have kids. But that's a perfect example of a micro inequity. And, every organization, every single company should have such robust training on all of the topics that we're talking about today, because so many people have so much to learn. And these micro inequities can come from, alleged well-intentioned people, but they're not trained to know that what they're saying is highly offensive.
So we've got a question here in the chat. It says, how do you think we can move the needle in HR to where it is not seen as the upholder of white supremacy, but the catalyst of sustainable change? As a woman of color and newer to the field, it can feel insurmountable.
Yes, Angelica, I agree with you 100%. And I worked in HR at PwC for a long time. I was there 12 and a half years total. And the firm does a heck of a lot from a diversity standpoint. And I still felt like I was, beating my head against this brick wall over here on some of the issues. It's a heavy lift. It's exhausting. There's so much work to do, but know that, number one, I'm here to help, and I'm happy to chat with you one-on-one as fellow HR professionals trying to make a difference. Number two, I'm also really passionate about finding places that align with my values. And does that organization align with my values? Are they committed to making significant changes in the areas where we need to make the most changes first? And if that is the case, then I would be on board to figure out and prioritize and strategize. Okay, what are the specific things we can do? When do we want to get these done by? How much do we want to invest in this in terms of people's time, money, etc. But if I start to see that my values don't align with the company's values, I would start to look, personally, I would start to look elsewhere, because there are a lot of companies out there that are committed to doing this. PwC is a great place to work, but it has its faults. But I was very impressed that under the new chairman, Tim Ryan, the firm released its diversity numbers. So they say, we're 5.1% Black and 5.9% Latino, and, literally, which, in case you didn't know, those numbers are terrible. The Black and Latino population in the US is probably around 15 to 20% each. And the census is also probably quite underrepresented, because a lot of Black and Latino individuals are afraid to complete the census for complex, valid reasons. So I give PwC a lot of credit in doing that, but looking at your values, looking at, is leadership committed to changing this? And if yes, great, let's roll up our sleeves and get started and invest the manpower in doing this. And if not, take your talents to a place that does appreciate you.
So there's another question in here, and it says, so why don't companies have this robust training? They don't care, they don't know how to approach these issues, all of the above?
Yeah, probably all of the above. And I think a lot of the issues have come to the surface this year. And one of the things I'm seeing is companies don't have it in their budget because, oh, we didn't realize there was a problem until, the whole country was erupting. So they're not necessarily in a place to carve out the time and money to start to make changes immediately. And that's a darn shame. So I think that's part of the issue. Let me look at the question again, just to make sure I'm answering it. Who asked it, Suman? Oh, Laura did. Why? Oh, lovely, Laura.
Laura.
Hi, Laura. Why don't companies have this robust training? Yeah, I think for a multitude of reasons, but they should have this robust training. So, that's part of my mission. I'm on a mission to make sure every organization has this training. And what I'm trying to do is, any company that books me to speak starting July 1st, they have to have this training or I'm not doing it. So even if they want training on something else, they have to have this in addition to the something else.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I wanted to talk about that today. When we talk about like real talk and getting to the heart and not being afraid, like I am so proud of you for, I know you always like assertively stand for what's right, and I appreciate you so much for that. But that, when you made that announcement, I was just so, and I still am so proud of you, because that takes a lot of guts. Some people might be afraid of what's going to be the fallout from that, right? But I appreciate you so much for that, and it's helping to impact and make the world a better place, and you're doing your part to help move this along. Everybody should want diversity. It's culture. People get so tangled up in what that word means. Basically, it's the fiber, the DNA of your organization. What do you want that to look like? Do you want people running around mistreating each other? Do you want true diversity? And that includes diversity of thought and a whole lot of other things, versus like, this is Tiffany, this is what you see when you see her. And so I got to give you kudos there. And I wanted to talk about that. So you did that for me. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And, back to that, the Institute of Internal Auditors. So I sent them the description of the Real Talk About Racism and Diversity. And this goes back to what I was saying about, we're going to have roadblocks in this work. There was one board member who was uncomfortable that I specifically say in the first line and throughout the paragraph, anti-Black racism. So he wanted to soften the blow for that. And, I didn't know which board member it was. I just knew it wasn't my contact. And that's a darn shame because, hello, the big story is anti-Black racism, And when we have people who in the accounting profession, especially, excuse my language, are anal and afraid to say anything that might upset anyone, those are the type of people that we have to shake by the shoulders if there wasn't social distancing and say, no, we have to say anti-Black racism because, that's the big story. That would be like me starting the news at 6 p.m. tonight with a feature story on a cute cat if there are election results. The big story is the election results, if we have them, not the cute cat. So, I didn't win that individual battle with him. They sent the note out and, I didn't get to interact with him to fight the battle, if you will. But I made DAMN sure in the webinar to allude to the fact that we have to be uncomfortable speaking very directly. We have to step into that discomfort and, fight this good fight. And, I can example examples from PwC of old white male partners being afraid to speak directly about things. But those are the type of people that we need to have the courage to call out and say, no, we do need to say that explicitly. That's how we're going to start to solve this, not by tiptoeing around the GD issue. Sorry for cursing, but I'm all fired up.
You are, I love it. I'm feisty myself. So I just really feel some type of way right now. You got me all fired up now because people, especially in HR, my HR folks who are in here, Russ, yourself included, it is so hard for us sometimes to fight these battles within organizations because we're trying to preserve our own jobs and we're worried about what is going to be the impact and what's the organization going to think, and is the organization going to feel that we're not towing the line, so to speak. So you have that, but then how are you then supposed to influence when you know that people don't just show up to work after George Floyd? Nobody is their regular selves. And I need these organizations to stop tiptoeing around these issues. It is not helpful. It does not serve us well. And I keep watching people just oh, okay, look at the cute cat. I don't want to look at the cute cat. I have some raw emotions going on here, and you, employer, have a duty to take care of me, to provide me with a psychologically safe environment. And ignoring these issues, that elephant in the room, somebody was talking about it in the chat, not helpful. Get it out. Even as uncomfortable as it is, you do not create engaged cultures by tiptoeing around things and acting like nothing's going on.
Yeah, and I am all about continuing the late John Lewis's legacy to make good trouble. And I assure you, I am going to continue to make good trouble. And at PwC, there was one time where I requested a meeting with the head partner for our, whatever it was, 2,000 person department because of nepotism. And we haven't talked about nepotism today, but nepotism is a slap in the face to all diversity efforts, because in 99% of the cases, the unqualified person who gets a foot in the door is white. And it just perpetuates and exacerbates the issues that we're talking about. So another goal of mine is that all companies have a no nepotism policy where they say we do not take any high-level referrals whatsoever from a partner, from a leader, from a high-level client. We have a zero nepotism policy, zero high-level referrals. Everybody has to go through the regular recruiting channels. And, this partner and I'm grateful to him that he let me meet with him. We didn't agree on the topic, but I'm glad that I had that time to at least speak my piece. And, the high-level partner who referred his unqualified white daughter, who had no experience whatsoever other than cheerleading, which paled in comparison to all the other candidates we hired, ended up luckily not getting the job because we took a stand. We were like, we are not going to hire her. She is not qualified. And again, this is a slap in the face to racism. So, or to diversity. So I don't know what your question is. And I don't know if I answered it, but thank you for letting me share that important point on nepotism. And hopefully people are inspired to start to have a discussion about having a no nepotism policy at your organization.
So important. And that actually, I have one follow-on thought, and then there's actually something related in the chat as well. So I see a lot, and I think when you have larger organizations, this happens too, where at a certain level, director and above, you have to have a referral. Well, who do you think those referrals are coming to? I've worked in these organizations, and people, it's the people who don't rock the boat. It's the people who are not the disruptors. It's the people who are going to make the least trouble and who toe the line that you're going to refer. But if you're going to change and evolve as an organization, and that includes diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, you have to think differently, and you can't just have this old boys, old guard way of thinking that only promotes white males. And I'll say this too, and my women might get mad at me, but just because I've seen this too, so I speak from experience, just because you have women in these leadership positions doesn't mean you've done your job either. So again, also need organizations to stop making those excuses, because that is also exhausting, even as a fellow woman.
Yes.
So one of the things, Tiffany, if I can just chime in here, a thought that I had is, we talk so much about the old white man or the old white woman. I'm also seeing and hearing it's not only the old people, but young people are still coming in with this idea of things have to be done this way and diversity. I mean, even if you look at our political arena, it is the young people who have really shaken up and support those who don't support, the Republican Party, right? I mean, it is what it is. And so how do we talk about, while we always focus or mostly focus on the old, guard or the old white people at the table, the youngsters who are coming in have not all of them, but they have that similar mindset. And so how do we engage them in a conversation in understanding, right? So we've had so many conversations on this series, and I'm sure everyone else has. Everyone brings in their own lenses from family, from where they've grown up. That whole intersectionality molds their lens. So if the young adults are in this scenario and they're looking at what their parents have done, their grandparents have done, the type of schools that they go to, which are all very similar thought process, how do we get to those young adults in making them open their eyes and understanding the importance of this DEI and belonging world?
Yeah, I think there are different ways to do that. I'm very happy that I had a discussion with white 30-something straight guy in tech who lives here in Jersey City, New Jersey. He's a food industry entrepreneur, has an amazing not only restaurant, but other things that he's building. So we've gotten to know each other. He's seen my posts on LinkedIn. Tiffany and Suman, my headline, trying to eradicate anti-Black racism and increasing diversity and economic justice. So he reached out and said, we're starting this new initiative in, this town in Jersey. And we want to make sure that the restaurant owners are diverse. How can we do that, Russ? So by him seeing my posts on LinkedIn, that inspired him to reach out. So we spoke for 30 minutes. I had 30 minutes worth of ideas for him. He said specifically, we're looking for women, we're looking for minorities, and specifically we're looking for bakers, and I can't remember the other demographic within the food industry that he was looking for. So I shared specific resources with him. So he's somebody that maybe if we weren't connected, if he didn't see my headline and my post, and we didn't continue to have interactions on LinkedIn about other topics, he might not have been inspired to reach out and ask me for my input. So I think, Tiffany and Suman, you're doing great work. God, there's a fly in here. It's like the Wendy Williams show. Sorry. you're doing great work and keep up the good work, because people are seeing your posts, and your posts are getting a lot of engagement. And I am confident that through series like this that you're doing on Fridays, that people are already inspired and going to be inspired to reach out to you to ask you questions on what they should do. So I think that's one way, keep speaking up, keep speaking out. And then other ways are like what I did with, anybody that has a workshop with me has to include this content or I won't book it. And yes, as you said, Tiffany, there was a risk there in me saying that I might lose business. But guess what? I'm having the best year ever business-wise. And I think that goes to show that the universe takes really good care of us. And if you're out there taking a stand and trying to make a difference, then the universe is going to help you do that. And yeah, so did that answer your question with at least a couple of ideas?
It did. It definitely did. I mean, my mind is also still going like, how do we get programs into schools and into higher education? And, as part of the onboarding process, maybe there needs to be some type of a DEI training or something in that onboarding process when it comes to bringing on new employees. Just trying to figure out how do you get to the younger groups so that their mindset can evolve at a younger stage when they're more, I don't want to use the word influential, but where their minds are a little bit more influenced and you can get to them, before they've got some really solid thoughts in their minds and their beings.
Yeah, I think, Suman, that's a great idea. Laura, who's in the audience, she and I worked for many years at Rutgers Newark, which is in the top 2 in terms of most diverse universities in the country. And because of COVID, we're not there anymore, and other reasons. But assuming we were still there and interacting with the assistant dean, et cetera, then suggesting ideas like this, like, hey, we would like to make a presentation to the 250-person business forum class on the importance of diversity and anti-racism. So, when you hear visionary ideas like Suman just had, gold star Suman, then making sure that you act on those visionary ideas and be politely assertive in suggesting them to the contacts that you have. There's still a fly in here, sorry.
It's interested in the conversation.
Yes.
I'm sorry, but hopefully, I can't with the fly.
Is on
I know
board.
The whole fly thing, right? It's like, don't land on your head.
I know, I'm not Mike Pence. Oh my God, that would be my worst nightmare if a fly landed on my head during this. Oh my God, shoot me now if that happened.
We need you around. We need your joy and light in this world. We need your work. You have to stay.
Okay, so we have a number of questions. The
Awesome.
chat is
Keep
really
them coming.
like bouncing off, which is amazing. So the first one says, do you think that diversity and inclusion are more effective when it is owned and implemented by top management or by HR? Which is the balance between these two entities?
It should be owned and managed by everyone, top management and HR, and in their performance metrics for the year, diversity should be a part of that. So if a company has crappy diversity and hasn't improved it, then leadership and HR should theoretically both be dinged for that.
I agree with that 1,000%. Another question, do you feel that part of the problem is that too often we don't have diversity in our own personal circles? We may work with people of different races and cultures, but outside the office, we may not include people who are different from us in our own personal circles.
So I'm very grateful to, as I said, I have a multicultural family. My stepmom is Latina. I've been to her homeland countless times. My niece and nephew are both Asian, adopted from Asia. Being gay, obviously. And then living here in New York, the majority of my closest friends, if I hold up my birthday dinner picture, it's, a nice mix of different, races, et cetera. So I think for me personally, the area I grew up in, suburban Philadelphia, is 99% white. And I didn't necessarily say, I don't want to live here anymore, but I knew I wanted to do bigger things personally and professionally. And I'm so much happier here in Jersey City, which is one of the top most diverse cities in the country, even more so than New York. And there's so much amazing culture here. And I think for anyone that doesn't have as diverse a circle, I think there are ways to improve that remotely, even if you don't necessarily live near or live in a very diverse area. You know, obviously our hosts today are both non-white women. So they're two fantastic people to connect with. And, you know, trying to make it a goal to say, okay, you know, how can I meet people who don't look like me so that I can more often hear different experiences. And the more we do that, the more we increase our cultural competence.
Yeah, and I'd like to add also, you know, in this world of COVID and social distancing, I, for one, have joined a lot of networking groups. But one of the things that I do, you know, a lot of these organizations will give you 2 free sessions. You can come and join in and see what it's like. And I walk in with that lens of how diverse, what does this screen look like for me? Is this a place where I'm going to get different perspectives, different ideas? Am I going to be able to connect with different people? And then based on that, I will join. And then if I don't join, I actually have emailed the owners or the leaders, admins of these organizations and said, here's the reason I'm not joining. You know,
Good.
is because it's not, at least on the 2 events I've gone to, it's not diverse. So can we have a conversation? And one organization actually got back to me and said, it just so happened that the group that you were in those 2 particular times was not diverse, but she sent me numbers. She was like, here's what it looks like. And I was like, well, thanks, but no thanks. Cause it's
right.
still, cause what does that mean then? You're not engaging them enough to come to these events.
Right.
You're not bringing them on. The topics may not be relevant. And so we had somewhat of a conversation, but I definitely didn't feel the open vibes from her. So needless to say, I didn't join that group.
Good for you. Gold star.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I like Russ. I want lots of gold stars.
He loves to give them out. So keep trying to earn them.
Only when they're deserving, though.
There we go.
She deserves them.
It's like, I'm telling you, it's like how I raise my kids. It's like, here's your sticker. And then you get so excited and you want to do more good things.
I love it. I want to just like go back to, there was something else in the chat that I was intending to segue into. Now I'm probably not going to find it. But, oh, here it is. So if in this group, I'm wondering, or this person's wondering, how many of the people in this audience have actually had world events such as what's going on right now, elections, what else happening, and how much of that is discussed in the workplace? Like, I'm curious now too, having this question, like, I wonder how many of us are actually having these conversations. Probably not that many unless you're the catalyst to that, because you're all here. So I trust that you're doing that. But if anyone's brave enough, you can share it in the chat too. But just out of curiosity, we can talk about it afterwards too, after we stop recording if you want.
And I think
great question.
High emotional intelligence is sharing appropriate emotions at the appropriate time with the appropriate people and encouraging others to do the same. So leaders everywhere should be encouraging their team members to talk about the emotions that they're experiencing outside of work, because we bring our full selves to work, whether we're in the office or working from home. And if someone is troubled, rightfully so, about what's happening in the US, then as their leader, I would want to give them the space to talk about that, vent about that, share the emotions that they're experiencing. So, part of this mandatory training that all organizations should have, and I'm making a post-it to add it to my fast ever-growing presentation, is the emotional intelligence piece, and making sure that we train leaders to give their non-white employees in particular, and especially their Black employees, an opportunity to share, if they want to, what their emotions are.
Okay, great. There's definitely some good stuff. There's a question, Russ, how do you refill or replenish your energy and spirit while doing this kind of work?
So I exercise 6 times a week religiously these last 7 months or so. And I'm excited that my last client today has to reschedule. So that means I get to start to exercise even earlier today. So I think exercise, number one, helps me refresh and recharge. So yeah, that's number one for me.
Okay, there's a part two, and they're asking from Suman and I how we practice self-care and sustainability in this work that are prone to burnout. It definitely, I think you heard that from Russ, it definitely, I mentioned it briefly earlier, it can be burnout. I have been carrying around my lavender stick and taking lots of whiffs of that because I love lavender, and my stress release lotion with me now too. Sometimes a coat of that helps just to, and it is the season to nourish our skin, self-care always. But also just your mindset has to be there, and you have to allow yourself sometimes to just feel the things. You have to just, the other night I was like, I just feel like I need a good cry. Laura, is she still here? She's my, there you are. She's my little, we joke about our ugly tears, but we get real vulnerable with each other. And sometimes you just need to be able to do that too. So Suma and I last week had some conversation afterwards, and she allowed me to talk about a lot of vulnerable things too. So just, you got to sometimes just get it out and talk about it. So
yeah, it's similar to what Tiffany said. I have a group of very, very close people who I reach out to. And like I told Tiffany before we came on live, most recently, I just shut, after the elections on Tuesday, I have not been on social media. I have not, and I know that might not be the right thing, sticking my head in the sand, but I don't need to be part of the drama in between until we get to the end result. So I made that conscious decision, not watch TV, not been on social media, and I will wait until the final results come in, and then and then I will have whatever I need to have. But it's a matter of being in touch. And then, little things like I went and got some Mandy done, right? So just that, I went with a girlfriend, and it was the two of us just caught up on life. And it's surrounding yourself with those positive things, the things that make you happy, is what I've been trying to do.
Can you help us enhance our cultural competence? So what you just showed us, I know just a tiny bit about, but
Sure.
it seems like it's prevalent in the Indian culture among women in particular. So do you mind telling us just 30 to 60 seconds what it's called? Maybe put it in the chat so we know how to spell it and say it,
Sure.
and what it is, what it signifies.
Yep, absolutely. This is Russ. I love you. Look at that. That's amazing. So it's called Mandy, and it's henna. And a lot of it is done, it's for auspicious occasions. So in India and in the Middle East, a lot of Middle Eastern women do it as well. Married time, the birth of your child, any type of auspicious occasion. It's just decoration, and it brings women together, since we all do it. And you sing, you hang out, you talk, and then, so the reason I got this done is, 2 days ago was an event called Karva Chauth, and Karva Chauth is the celebration of marriage. So traditionally, women fast all day for the longevity and health of their husband. As generations have moved forward, husbands now fast with their wives, and you pray, you can't break your fast until you've seen the moonlight, and there's prayers and there's rituals, and then next Sunday is Diwali, which is the Festival of Lights. It's the Indian New Year, the Hindu New Year. So it's all the celebratory time period right now, and it's called Mandi, and it's done with henna.
Very cool. And how is Mandy spelled? Is it like the woman's name?
No, it's Mehndi.
Okay, oh God, Tiffany, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Sumana, I'm so grateful to you for sharing that. That warms my heart, and my eyes are actually a little moist. I don't know if you can tell, but like it was just, no, seriously, like number one, it was a really great story. Number two, I love enhancing my cultural competence. And, you know, even if just one person in our audience today didn't know that, but now knows that, then, you know, that's kind of why we're all here today, to even those of us that do this work for a living, to continue to enhance our cultural competence.
Exactly. Yep.
I know we're about to go and some people have to drop off, so I'm just going to share my LinkedIn in the chat in case those of you who are on today that I'm not yet connected with are inspired to connect. And shout out to Nikolai. I just messaged him back this morning. I've been so delinquent on that. And Nikolai, I promise I will text you tomorrow. Great to see you.
Awesome. So I think you wrapped us up pretty well there. Suman, do you want to take us into the final?
Yeah,
final
excellent. You know, of course, we are coming up to the 1 hour mark here. Russ, you have been fantastic. This has been such a great conversation. I know that there were a few more questions in the chat. You know, we will go unrecorded for the next 10 or 15 minutes. Russ, if you can stay with us, that would be great, fantastic, so we can have a further conversation. We'll save the chat, and Russ, maybe if you can respond to those over the next several days, that would be great. And then we can send them out. We can post them on LinkedIn, maybe some responses that way to those unanswered questions. But this was great. Russ, thank you so much for a fabulous conversation, for an enlightening conversation. I think we had a lot of great ideas. You know, it wasn't just information coming one way, but there are a lot of actionable items that were shared as well, which is the goal here. Not only education, but what can we walk away with? What are some of the tools and things that we can start to implement? So thank you so much for your time. And I hope to see everyone in the unrecorded session in the next few minutes or seconds.
Thanks, everyone.
Everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Suman, for organizing.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.